Hello, this is Loopline, and in this video I'm going to cover some ideal settings in Search Engine Ranker. So it's more of a guideline because the ideal settings do vary a little bit based on your setup because if you have a faster server, slower server, faster connection, the proxies, the shared, private, the quality of those at any given point, the particular targets that you're after, filters that you have in place, and a host of other things really have an impact on a lot of different things that are all connected together in SER. So to say that one set of settings is the end all really isn't accurate, and it can't be because it varies based on different ones. I have different servers that I have to tweak the settings on. If I try to use one set of settings exactly the same on the other, it doesn't work. In fact, it'll even crash, and I get better performance by tweaking the settings. But these are some general guidelines. So there's lots of different elements to SER in general. So let's start with just the basic program options. So in here on the submission tab, you have your threads. Now, threads vary. I've heard lots of different things as far as the threads go because these threads are incorporated into all the elements when you're doing email verifying, when you're doing submitting, when you're doing link checking and verified, if you're doing re-verified, if you're doing any kind of PR checking, if you're doing other things in the background. All of those sorts of things use the threads. So it sort of depends on what it is that you're doing, how many threads you could use. But it does vary based on the server speed as well. So if you're on a VPS that has a 100 megabit connection, or a laptop that is on a home connection that has 6 megabit, or maybe you're on a dedicated server with a gigabit connection. So obviously the number of connections you can run vary based off of that. So on this particular server, I have it set at 250. And I would try something somewhere between 100 and 300 to start, and basically you just turn up the connections until GSA crashes. And when it crashes and tells you it has too much memory and it wants to lower the threads, then you can sort of back it off. With everything else I have going on this server at this time, if I run more than 250 connections, it tends to crash. Now, I have a ton of other stuff going on this server, so try what you like. And that's why on this particular server I have it set up to pull it down if it exceeds these settings for CPU and memory. Timeout, I think the default is like 30. A lot of people use anywhere from 120 to 180. 160 is popular. This is based on seconds, so this is 3 minutes. It depends again on your connections. The higher the connections you go, the more the timeout you might need. But basically this is how long it's going to wait before GSA will abort the connection, whether that's trying to post, trying to read the page in the first place, and that sort of thing. So if you're only targeting contextual sites, for instance, and you're running 100 connections, you could probably set this a lot lower because contextual sites are going to load quicker as a general rule. And if you're using lower connections, then it doesn't matter. However, if on the same setup you're trying to target a lot of things like image comments and blog comments and trackbacks and that sort of thing, those tend to have a lot of links on one page, and so the pages tend to get larger, and so they take longer to download, so you might want a higher timeout. So it depends on where you're targeting there, but you can try it. Try going down to 60 seconds and try going up to like 240 seconds and see where it is that it works best for you. And so I have it set at 180 just because I want to give it a higher range rather than a lower range, just to make sure I don't lose out on things. Obviously you want to use proxies. What you use proxies for is subjective and has an impact. I tend to use them for submitting and PR checking, and I also skip for identification. And the reason for that is the first time it's downloading a page to see if the platform's compatible or that sort of thing, there's no reason why you can't just load a page from your IP. It's not going to hurt anything, and using a proxy just gives it one more task it has to do from a proxy, and those can be a bottleneck sometimes. So I choose that. On verification, you definitely don't need proxies. On email checking, that depends. I've had great success on some of my servers that actually I uncheck this and do not use proxies for email checking. You would think that the end proxies would, or the end email providers, such as Outlook.com or that sort of thing, would ban your IP, but it goes slow enough that it hasn't been an issue for me. And then I don't have to worry about proxies bottlenecking in there, because if your proxies fail when they're trying to download emails, you can lose a lot of contextual links. However, if you're using a server company that is known for GSA, like if you use a server company that does a lot of GSA hosting, then their IPs are probably blacklisted by a lot of sites, so you're going to have to use proxies. But if you just use a server company that is just an average everyday server company that doesn't really have a lot of quote-unquote black hat programs being hosted on their servers as a general rule, which is what I tend to like to use, then you don't really need this, because the IP isn't banned and it just makes it quicker. So under the CAPTCHA settings tab, I have multiple copies of CAPTCHA Breaker running, and the initial launch and the primary lists are CAPTCHA Breaker only. So I only use CAPTCHA Breaker on those. That may change in the future as far as secondary options, but the primary lists are going to remain just CAPTCHA Breaker only. I have 2 different CAPTCHA Breaker servers running, because in case one server goes down or that sort of thing, I want CAPTCHA Breaker to come through. So I have the primary server set at 3 retries and the secondary server set at 5 retries. Now, as far as the actual servers go, or the retries go rather, I typically tend to use 5. You could use 0, you could use 10. So it depends on where you want to go. 5 is probably ideal because I'm building a list with 5. I think 5 is a nice number because it gives you the most chances to get a CAPTCHA solved by CAPTCHA Breaker, but doesn't go excessive. However, the higher the CAPTCHA retry you go, it impacts your links per minute. Now, I'm going to talk about links per minute in just a couple of minutes down the road in the video here. A lot of people get obsessed about links per minute. I absolutely don't care about links per minute, and I usually turn it off and put it on verified links per minute or something else, because it doesn't matter how fast you go, it just matters how many verified links you get. Now, you don't want to go pond scum slow, turtle slow, but you also don't want to sacrifice a lot of good quality links just so you can blaze through there. So I guess it depends on your style, but there are different things that impact links per minute. So if you want your links per minute higher at the possibility of losing good quality links, you can go lower on the retries. If you want to go for a little safer route and do more retries, it might lower your links per minute, but it might give you more overall links. Obviously, I wouldn't ask the user for CAPTCHAs. You can use AskMeBot, Bandit IM if you want. But again, these are made with CAPTCHA Breaker. And for indexing, you can do whatever you want there. That's going to potentially impact links per minute again, but not really going to impact the actual verified links that are built. Under filtering, you can impact the verified links. One, obviously the filtering to the spam sites. This is probably a good idea. I have it. It's easy. You just check a box and it downloads these, so you're not building to such sites. You could probably, if you had especially if you're doing like churn and burn stuff, I might just go ahead and uncheck this. But if you're doing like a quality site where you want long-term results, then probably check that. And down here under maximum size of the website download, on this server I have it set to 20 megabytes. Again, you're pulled back to the type of links you're building. If you're building contextual links, you could probably go down to like 2, maybe 3 megabytes, because those pages are probably small. However, if you're trying to download a page of blog comments to use for tier 3 or higher, just to throw it out there, or if you're using like blog comments to index your links, which a lot of people do, or pingbacks or trackbacks or blah blah blah, all those types of links, and they're non-contextual links, those sites can get huge. So if you set this to 50 or even 75 megabytes, then you're going to get the most amount of links built, but obviously that increases the memory that CAPTCHA Breaker uses. So if you have really big problems with memory usage, you might want to lower this. It also is going to slow down things and potentially give you less links per minute. It may not. It depends on the actual pages. But when I'm building lists, a lot of times I'll go all the way up to 75 megabytes. But you can go lower. On this particular server, I have a heavier focus on contextual type stuff, so I have it set at a lower setting. But keep that in mind for depending on what you're doing. You can toy with that and see what you get. And then under the advanced segment, you have the different folders. If you're using Blue Box real-time sync, then refer to that as far as global folders go. Probably want to save PR if you have it, and then these other settings here, just leave those like they are. I believe they come pre-set up like this by default. And then going into actual project options, if we go ahead and just start a new project here, and I'm just going to tick off every platform just for the sake of it, so we get all of our tabs across the top here. There's not a whole lot on the data section. I'm really working on optimized settings in this video, not on explaining what everything is. So there's not really much in this data segment, or really anything at all, that's going to have a big impact on whether or not a link is built. Obviously, providing some good quality information in these descriptions and that sort of thing has a higher chance of a link sticking, especially if it goes through moderation. But a lot of people are just going to use something like Whack or Content Machine or something to load all that content in, so you can go through and just do that like normal. Under Article Manager, also not a whole lot going on here. The one thing I might say is that you can change how your link goes. Here, this could impact your links per minute if you put it in a random location versus a sentence at the bottom versus just a link, or no link, obviously. But do not submit same article to more than one times. If you're allowing under the Options tab for multiple accounts at a given site, so if you have domain A and you set it to do, I think the default is like 5 sites, and you check the box that says allow multiple creations on the same domain, multiple postings rather, on the same site again, and you have it set up somewhere down here, this is going to try to post. If you're using something like Whack, for instance, and it only puts in one spun article here, if you check this, it's only going to try to post once, and then you're going to get the error that it is not able to post more articles, because it doesn't matter how much it's spun, it still sees it as one article, and it won't submit it again to the same account or whatever you have here. So, which is obviously just going to result in a bunch of wasted threads, and then again slowing down your links per minute. This is a case where links per minute is a good thing. Links per minute is just a metric, and it is there to help you troubleshoot, to make sure that you haven't done something that is making a big mistake, because if you make a change and you see a huge drop in links per minute, you might say, okay, let me have a look at the logs. Well, this is one of those cases where if you only have one article and you have it set to build more than one per account under options, and you have this checked, then you're just wasting threads, and that is going to lower links per minute, and that is a bad thing to do. So typically leave that unchecked if you have one article, or if you have tons of them, it doesn't matter. So under options, this is where most of everything happens. Obviously, you can set up however you want, and project filters and that sort of thing up here under submissions and that sort of thing. I just set this to choose random and set it to not ask the user, but just ask all CAPTCHA services. And then you can do a custom retry if you have a particular project that's whatever. Like say you're working with contextuals, maybe you want to do a custom retry of 5 or 6 or 7, whereas if you're doing a project on tier 3 and you're just throwing everything out there, maybe you don't care, maybe you want to do a custom retry and force it lower than what you have set by default in program options and set it to like 1. So you can choose that as you like. Not a whole lot going on here as far as, you can verify links if you want, choose your index or option if you want. It is a good idea to choose these two options. Try to always place a URL with anchor text in descriptions and comments, and continuously post to a site even if it's failed before. So to explain those two briefly, try to always place a URL with anchor text in descriptions and comments. That has a couple of different elements. If you are building a profile page, like say you do a forum profile or a profile on a social network type thing, typically you get a link in the profile, but then also this will try to place links in posts themselves. And I've also seen mentioned where it also will try to post links in other articles outside of that concept. Anywhere that it posts an article, it will try to post a link. And so this will help you get the most links, most bang for your buck in the link category, I guess is a way to say it. So I would go ahead and check that. And then also continuously try to post to a site even if it's failed before. That's a good option, because if it fails once, and say it fails because of CAPTCHAs, then it comes back around again and it's in the history. So normally Search Engine Ranker would skip that site, but this will tell it to try it again. And this is good for lots of reasons. Say that website was down at the time, maybe it exceeded its bandwidth, maybe it had a server error or whatever. As it comes back around the second time, it'll try to post that site again. This option might slow down links per minute a little bit, but overall we're looking for total verified links found and built, because that's what helps you rank, not how fast you build links. So generally I would say to check that. And then as we go down here, generally you're going to want to do check none under search engines because you're using a list that's always updated 24/7, so you really don't need to use search engines. And so coming down a little bit farther, don't forget to use URLs from global site lists if enabled, and choose whichever slot it was that you chose when you set up Blue Box Sync, and you can watch the video for that. And then use URLs linking on same verified URL. I would uncheck that. It could actually build more links, but it will slow things down. It will reduce your links per minute. And since you have a massive amount of auto-approve URLs already being delivered to you, it's probably not necessary. But if you want to go that route and you want to get a ton of links, it will spider your verified links and then extract those outbound links, and then it will try to see if it can build a link on those pages as well. Again, it can add links, but it does slow it down, and you probably don't need it given that you already have never-ending supply of always up-to-date verified lists. Going down further, I would leave analyze and post to competitor links unchecked. Allow posting on the same site again. This is really up to you. If you want to have multiple posts and accounts per domain.com, then you can choose this. Again, I think that the default is 5. I just have some random settings here that popped up. And so choose whatever you want there. Just make sure that you have enough articles to equal the number of accounts that you have set up here as far as the actual accounts and the maximum posts per an account. So depending on how you have it set up in Article Manager, just make sure you have enough articles, otherwise you're wasting bandwidth and connections. And then under filters, obviously to get the most links per minute, you're going to want to not enable anything. So don't turn on outbound link filter, don't turn on PR filters, don't turn on bad word filters, and then go in here and go and check off every box. So check them all. And it may give you the forum pop-up thing. You can go ahead and hit OK and just use all of them. So that is the ideal settings for maximum links per minute, but we all know that we have projects that are important and we would rather avoid certain links, maybe bad words or in URL or certain countries or whatever. So set the filters however you want. Just be aware that if you turn on filters, obviously that lowers links per minute, and the more filters you turn on, the lower the links per minute. Also, it impacts your verified links. So if you set it at a maximum outbound links here of 20 and set it at a PR5 plus, and then no bad words and nothing from countries except for, like 3 countries in the list, you're not going to get very many verified links because you just filtered out a ton of links. So use the filters judiciously and use them in a way that's good for you, but be aware that they do obviously affect how many verified links you get built. Under email verification, you want to have as many emails as you had set back here under options for accounts to create plus some extra. So if you have it set to post to 5 accounts, then generally speaking, doubling it is probably a good way to start when you're in lower numbers. So I'd go with 10 emails. If you have it set to 2 accounts, then 5 emails is probably fine. If you have it set to do 100 accounts per domain, then you're probably going to want like 150 emails or so at least, because although that might be overkill on the accounts per domain, but each account can only use 1 email. So if you have domain A and you want 100 accounts, then each one of those 100 accounts has to have its own email address. So if you load in 5 email addresses and put this at 100, you're not going to get it. And the other 95 accounts it tries to create, it's just going to run threads and going to kick back that the email is already in use. And again, that just wastes resources, lowers links per minute. And this is a case where when you waste resources, that's a good time to use the links per minute metric to figure out what you're doing that you shouldn't be doing. Look at the logs and tweak that. So just make sure you have as many emails as you do have options. If it's available for you and you can do it, like say you go to Bandit IM for instance, and they offer the BIMs where you can buy different providers, so like you can do Outlook and Mail.ru. Ideally, you would use multiple providers in case a particular provider is blocked at a given domain. On the next round through, it might pick one of the other providers randomly and try it on that. So say Mail.ru is blocked at domain A and Outlook.com is blocked at domain B, and you put 5 of each in there. When it goes through a round for domain A and it gets one of the Mail.ru's, on the second posting round to it, when it tries to create another account later, it might wind up with an Outlook one and succeed. And same thing vice versa on domain B. So it's not crucial I do use different providers just for diversity, as far as, at soandso.com. This would be especially true as well if you use a catch-all email address, because most websites aren't going to ban, outlook.com. They might, but they're probably not, because they know that there's going to be spammers and there's going to be legitimate people. But if it's like yourdomain.com and you use a catch-all email address, and you've been using this catch-all email address for 6 months, and you've been hammering every site known to man that you can find on every list possible, then your domain name could very well be banned, and therefore a lot of your emails and stuff is not going to succeed. So what you would want to do then is obviously use those, and it's real cheap to get emails. You can go over here and under ad and you can buy them. So anyways, if you can use diversity and domains there, that's great. If you're only using one domain name, that's of course fine too, but just make sure you have that set up appropriately, meaning enough email addresses, probably about twice as many. Unless you get into higher numbers, then you may not need twice as many as the number of accounts you want to create. One thing that you do want to note is if you only want to create 3 accounts per domain and you load in 100 emails, as it goes through, it's going to use those 100 emails. Search Engine Ranker will use all 100 emails among various domains out there. And so whenever it goes to verify, it has to verify through 100 accounts. So that means it has to log into 100 accounts and download those 100 accounts verification emails and then get it done. Whereas if you're only using, say, double that, and you wanted 3 accounts per domain, and you put in 6 emails, or maybe 7 or 8 or whatever, just to be on the safe side, then it only has to log into that many, 6, 7, 8 number of emails and download them. So obviously that's less overall threads taken up and less overall connections made, which speeds things up, which helps your links per minute go faster. Again, this is a metric area we're using the metric to optimize. You want to go links per minute faster in this case because it helps you to just be more efficient. It's not necessarily going to help how many verified links you have though. So just bear that in mind. Down here under time to wait between logins, it's probably a good idea to use this. Depending, you can use this per account or per POP server. I use this whenever I don't use proxies, just because that way I'm not just hammering away on a particular domain out there checking emails. If I wanted to use proxies, I could probably adjust this time to wait and get better results and that sort of thing. But again, I'm not about speed. I'm about overall efficiency and getting the most links built in a reasonable time. And obviously you can put whatever you want under notes. The last segment in SER that will affect things is the actual projects. And those more or less tie into links per minute. So let's talk about that and links per minute for just a second. Now, there are other things that you want to do when using the list, such as clearing out your target URL history, or cache rather, and then clearing out submitted and that sort of thing before you start loading things up. But I'll talk about that in a getting started guide. This video is about settings itself. And links per minute. Links per minute is a metric that I think got built in as a guide, so that if you tweak something and your links per minute drop way down, you can look at it and say, okay, was that good or was that bad? What it's designed to help you do is, if your links per minute slow way down, it's designed to help you look at the logs and then say, okay, I added 100 email addresses instead of 10, and now I can see that my links per minute drop during verification because it has to go out and verify through 100 email addresses rather than through 10. That doesn't actually impact your verified links, but if you were to change other settings in there, it could actually impact whether or not you're able to build a link. So let's say you put your limitation for the maximum website size to 1 megabyte, and you're just cranking out links per minute. That's great, but every site above 1 megabyte you can't build a link on, so that actually impacts the amount of verified links you can build. So links per minute is a good metric to help you realize when there's a problem, but some people get absolutely obsessed about links per minute. And so if I have a project and I can set up the settings in SER and I can be cranking it out at 400 links per minute, but yet I only get to build 25,000 links out of a given list, or in a given time frame for a particular project, okay. If I can take the same list that I started with and set up different settings and only get 25 links per minute but build 50,000 links instead, then I'm going to choose the 50,000 links. Now, if I'm getting 1 link per minute versus 400, then I'm going to try to choose something in the middle because I don't have 6 months to try to build enough links that I could build the same amount of links in 2 days. So you have to do a happy medium and find that balance between getting the most verified links you can get, but also doing it at a reasonable speed. My goal is not to make my servers or my lists crank out at maximum links per minute. My goal is to make lists that provide quality, good targets, as well as ones that are going to work in a reasonable time frame and provide the most verified lists. So if you want to tweak your SER to get the most links per minute, you can do that. You can, lower a lot of thresholds, not use filters, and also the number of projects you have loaded affect your links per minute, because if you load in one project, first thing SER is going to do is it's going to go after the non-contextual style links to start to build those, and then it's going to start to bring in contextual links, and then it takes a while for those verification emails to come in and be checked for those links to impact links per minute. However, if you load up 20 projects, SER is going to start building links to all sorts of different projects, take off really fast, and then it'll turn some of those projects to active verification mode where it's verifying those links while other ones are still be building, and you'll have a mix-up where it'll change back and forth, but some of them are always going to be building links and some of them are always going to be verifying, and overall you get a more efficient use of SER's resources. Therefore, you get a higher links per minute. So you're not going to get killer links per minute by loading in one project. So load up all your projects and start them all at the same time and let it rip. So that's another way that it impacts links per minute. Again, whether or not you run one project or 20 projects at once doesn't necessarily impact how many verified links you get at the end of the day, and that's what's important, verified links. But at the same time, using SER's resources efficiently is a wise decision. So you can build, 20,000 verified links to 20 projects by doing them one at a time over the course of, 20, 30 days, or maybe you could do it all within a week because you use the resources more efficiently and run 20 projects at once. So that's just stuff to bear in mind. If you're looking for me to give you, use this, X, Y, and Z, I can't do it. I can guide you, but you'll have to do a little bit of tweaking that you can read all over forums and everywhere else, and they'll tell you use these settings, and that's fine. That's okay. I can tell you what settings to use to get the most links per minute, but again, it's about verified links, and you really sort of have to do a little bit of tweaking on your particular setup to see what yields the most verified links. And when you get to a point where you get enough verified links and you're ranking your websites, links per minute doesn't even really matter anymore, because the end game isn't to see how fast you can go, is to rank websites or get traffic and make money. So that is what I consider to be optimal settings for Search Engine Ranker, and a lot of extra information along the way. If you made it through this video, congratulations and thanks for hanging in there.